"We're alone now, let's do what needs doing," said the Apache woman, handed to the rancher as a joke. "We're alone now, let's do what needs doing," said the Apache woman, handed to the rancher as a joke. The rope burned into her wrists as three drunk cowboys shoved her toward the wooden porch. Jake Morrison stood in his doorway holding a coffee cup, watching them approach his ranch house with confusion turning to anger in his eyes. The woman kept her head high despite the bruises on her face and the torn sleeve of her dress. She had been walking through town when they grabbed her, laughing about giving the lonely rancher a gift he never asked for. "Here you go, Morrison." "Consider it a housewarming present," the tallest one said, spitting tobacco juice onto the dirt. "Found her wandering near the creek. Figured you could use some company out here." Jake set down his cup slowly. "Cut her loose. What's that?" The cowboy grinned, revealing brown teeth. "Thought you'd be grateful. You've been alone out here for 2 years since your wife passed." "I said cut her loose." "Now." The three men exchanged glances. The woman remained silent, her dark eyes fixed on something beyond the horizon. Blood trickled from a cut above her eyebrow. Her breathing was steady despite everything, and Jake noticed her hands were clenched into fists even while bound. "You ain't serious, Morrison. She's just an Apache. No one's gonna miss her." Jake walked down the porch steps. At 42, he had fought in enough battles to recognize when violence was coming. His hand rested near his hip, close to where his revolver hung. "I'm only going to say this one more time. Cut her loose and get off my property." The shortest cowboy, a kid who couldn't have been more than 19, pulled out a knife and cut the ropes. The woman's arms fell to her sides, but she didn't move otherwise. She stood perfectly still, watching Jake's face as if measuring what kind of man he was. "You're making a mistake, Morrison," the tall one said. "When word gets around that you're protecting savages, folks won't take kindly to it. Then I guess folks and I will have a problem. Get out." The three men mounted their horses, muttering curses. As they rode away, the tall one shouted back, "Don't come crying to us when she scalps you in your sleep." Jake waited until they disappeared down the trail before turning to the woman. She was younger than he first thought, maybe 25, with sharp features and eyes that held more intelligence than fear. Her dress was torn at the shoulder and covered in dust. She studied him with the same intensity he'd seen in wild animals deciding whether to run or fight. "There's a well around back," he said quietly. "You can wash up if you want. I've got bandages inside for that cut." She didn't move. "I'm not going to hurt you," Jake continued. "Those men had no right to do what they did. You're free to go whenever you want." Still, she remained motionless. Then she spoke, her English clear and precise. "They will come back. Maybe. But not tonight. You should have let them take me away. Now they will tell others you defended me. That makes you my ally in their eyes. That makes you their enemy." Jake picked up his coffee cup from where he'd left it on the porch rail. It was cold now. "I've had worse enemies. The well's around back. I'll leave bandages and a clean shirt on the porch rail here. Do what you think is best." He walked inside and closed the door, giving her space to decide. Through the window, he watched her stand there for a full minute before she finally moved toward the back of the house. Jake sat at his kitchen table and ran his hands through his graying hair. He knew she was right about one thing. Those cowboys would talk, and talk had a way of spreading like wildfire in these parts. By tomorrow, half the territory would know that Jake Morrison had chosen an Apache woman over his own kind. The sun was setting when he heard her footsteps on the porch. He had left food on a plate outside along with the bandages and shirt. When he checked later, the food was gone, but the plate remained neatly stacked. The shirt was gone too. He found her sitting against the barn wall, wearing his oversized shirt over her torn dress, the bandage wrapped around her head. She was watching the road with eyes that never seemed to blink. Jake brought out a blanket and set it beside her without saying anything. As he turned to leave, she spoke again. "My name is Kai. It means willow tree. Jake Morrison. This is the Double M Ranch. I know who you are. Everyone knows the rancher who lives alone and speaks to no one. Guess I'm not alone anymore." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something passed between them that Jake couldn't quite name. It wasn't trust yet, but it wasn't fear either. It was understanding, the kind that comes when two people recognize they're both swimming against the same current. "We're alone now," Kai said, her voice low and steady. "Now let's do what needs doing." Jake nodded slowly. "And what exactly needs doing? Those men will return with more. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. When they do, they won't come to talk." The desert wind picked up, carrying the smell of sage and distant rain. Jake knew she was right. He had made his choice on that porch, and there was no taking it back. The question now wasn't whether trouble would come, but when it would arrive and how ready they'd be to face it. "Then I guess we better prepare," Jake said. Kai stood up, and even in his oversized shirt, with her face bruised and cut, she carried herself like a warrior.
"You have weapons enough?"
Then we start there. Show me what you have, and I'll show you how to use them better." Jake almost smiled. "Almost high. You know weapons? My father was a scout. My brother fought in the last uprising. I know weapons better than those drunk fools know which end of a gun to hold." They walked to the barn together as darkness settled over the ranch. Inside, Jake showed her his collection. 2 rifles, 3 revolvers, a shotgun, and enough ammunition to hold off a small army. Kai picked up each weapon, checking the weight and balance with practiced hands. Jake watched her work and realized that whatever was coming, he wasn't facing it alone anymore. "They'll expect you to run," Jake said. "They'll expect me to apologize or hand you over." Kai loaded one of the revolvers with smooth, efficient movements. "Then we give them something they don't expect. And what's that?" She looked at him with those steady, unflinching eyes. "A fight they can't win." The night stretched ahead of them, full of possibilities and dangers. Somewhere in town, those 3 cowboys were drinking and talking, spreading their poison. And here on the Double M Ranch, 2 people who had been alone were now together, preparing for the storm they both knew was coming. The desert had a way of testing people, of stripping away everything false until only truth remained. Jake Morrison and Kai were about to discover what truth looked like when it wore gun leather and stood its ground against the whole world. The moon rose over the canyon walls, casting long shadows across the ranch. Neither of them slept that night. They had work to do, and the work couldn't wait. When dawn came, it would bring answers. But first they had to survive until morning, and that meant being ready for anything. Jake checked the doors and windows while Kai positioned weapons at strategic points throughout the house. They worked in silence, 2 strangers united by circumstance and choice, preparing to defend something neither of them could quite name yet, but both of them felt deep in their bones. This was just the beginning. The real test was still coming. The first rider appeared just before dawn, a silhouette against the purple sky. Then another. Then 5 more. They didn't approach directly, but circled the ranch at a distance, making their presence known. Kai watched them from an upstairs window while Jake stood at the front door, his rifle loaded and ready. The message was clear. The town had made its decision, and now Jake and Kai would have to make theirs. Stand and fight, or run and hope. But neither of them was the running type, and everyone watching knew it. The desert wind carried the smell of horses and dust and violence waiting to be born. Somewhere in that line of riders was the tall cowboy with the brown teeth, and he was smiling. He thought he had already won. He didn't know Kai. He didn't know Jake. And he was about to learn that some mistakes cost more than pride. They cost everything. The sun broke over the horizon, painting the desert gold and red, colors of beauty and blood, and the waiting finally ended as the first shot rang out across the empty land. Morning light revealed 12 riders arranged in a loose semicircle around the ranch house. Jake recognized most of them from town. The hardware store owner, 2 ranch hands from the neighboring spread, the deputy who drank too much and wore his badge like it made him God. The tall cowboy sat in the center on a paint horse, looking proud of himself for gathering such a crowd. "Morrison," he called out, "we're here to collect what you're holding. Send her out and there won't be trouble." Jake stepped onto the porch, rifle held casual but ready. "Already told you yesterday. She's free to go whenever she wants. She's chosen to stay. Then you're choosing to stand with savages against your own people. That makes you a traitor. Funny. I don't remember betraying anyone. Far as I recall, I'm standing on my own land defending someone from a mob of drunk cowards." The deputy spoke up, trying to sound official. "Jake, don't make this harder than it needs to be. That woman belongs with her people. We're just trying to return her to where she came from. She came from town, from the creek, from walking free on land that doesn't belong to any of us. You grabbed her and dragged her here like property. Now you want to lecture me about what's right?" The hardware store owner shifted in his saddle, looking uncomfortable. A few others exchanged glances. Jake pressed forward while doubt showed on their faces. "Any of you actually think about what you're doing here? You rode out before sunrise to terrorize a woman who never did anything to any of you. That sit right with your conscience? That's something you're proud of." "She's Apache," someone shouted from the back. "Her people killed settlers. Killed women and children." "Did she?" Jake's voice cut sharp. Did she personally kill anyone? Or are you just lumping every Apache together because it's easier than thinking? Kai appeared in the doorway behind Jake. She had changed into pants and a shirt she'd found in his storage, clothes that had belonged to his late wife. In her hands was the shotgun, held with confidence that made several riders pull back on their reins. She didn't point it at anyone, just held it ready. "I am Kai," she said, her voice carrying across the yard. "Daughter of Swiftwater, sister of Running Deer. My father guided the cavalry through the mountains for 3 years before they paid him with a bullet in the back. My brother died defending a wagon train from bandits, white bandits, who were robbing settlers. I have killed 3 men in my life. One who tried to rape my cousin. One who murdered my uncle for his horse. One who burned down the school where Apache children were learning to read. I have never killed anyone who didn't deserve it. Can any of you say the same?" The silence that followed was thick and heavy. Even the tall cowboy seemed uncertain now. Kai continued, her words precise and cutting. "You call me savage. You call my people animals. But you're the ones who rode here with guns to drag away a woman because you think her blood makes her less than human. Who exactly is the savage?" The deputy tried to recover control. "This ain't about philosophy. This is about law and order. The town council decided she needs to leave the territory." "The town council," Jake said, "doesn't have authority over my ranch or who I choose to have on it. You want to enforce some made-up law, bring a federal marshal. Until then, get off my property. There's 12 of us, Morrison. Just 2 of you. Then you better make your first shots count, because we will." Kai stepped forward to stand beside Jake. Together they presented a unified front, both armed, both ready. The morning sun climbed higher, turning the desert into a furnace. Sweat ran down faces.
Horses stamped and snorted.
Nobody wanted to be the first to shoot, but nobody wanted to back down either. The hardware store owner broke first. "This is crazy. I came out here thinking we were just going to scare them, make a point. I didn't sign up for killing Jake Morrison over some woman I don't even know." "You turning yellow, Henry?" the tall cowboy sneered. "I'm turning smart. Jake's right. We don't have any legal standing here. And I ain't interested in starting a war over nothing." Henry turned his horse and rode away. 2 others followed immediately. The deputy watched them go, uncertainty written all over his face. "Jake, if you'd just be reasonable about this." "I am being reasonable. You're the ones pointing guns at me on my own land. The town won't stand for this. Then the town can come talk to me proper-like. Without guns. Without threats. Until then, I've got work to do." The standoff stretched for another minute before the deputy finally gave a signal and the remaining riders turned away. Only the tall cowboy remained, his face twisted with rage. "This ain't over, Morrison. You made your choice. Now you live with it. I've been living with my choices for 42 years. I'll manage one more." The cowboy spat and rode off, kicking his horse harder than necessary. Jake and Kai stood on the porch until all the riders disappeared from view. Only then did Jake lower his rifle. His hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline wearing off. Kai noticed but said nothing. "They'll be back," she said. "I know. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next week, but eventually. I know that too." They went inside. Jake put coffee on while Kai checked all the weapons they'd positioned throughout the house the night before. The morning sun streamed through the windows, making everything look peaceful and normal, which was a lie. Nothing was normal anymore, and nothing would be peaceful for a while. "Why did you do it?" Kai asked suddenly. "Why stand against your own people for me?" Jake poured 2 cups of coffee and thought about how to answer. "They stopped being my people when they decided cruelty was acceptable. My wife Jenny, before she died, she used to say that you measure a man by how he treats those who can't fight back. Those cowboys grabbed you because they thought no one would care." "Well, I care." Kai accepted the coffee and sat at the table. "Your wife sounds like she was wise. She was. Cancer took her 2 years ago. Some days I still expect to see her in the kitchen or hear her voice calling from the garden. The shirt I'm wearing, it was hers. She was about your height, a bit heavier maybe. Kept her clothes thinking I'd donate them someday, but I never got around to it. I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry for yours too. You've lost people, I can see it in your eyes." They sat in comfortable silence, drinking coffee and listening to the ranch wake up around them. Chickens clucked in the yard. A cow lowed from the pasture. Life continued despite the violence that had almost erupted an hour ago. That was the strange thing about the West. Death and life existed side by side, separated by nothing but luck and timing. "So what now?" Jake asked. "You can stay as long as you want." I meant what I said about that, but you should know what you're getting into. Those men will make life difficult. They'll spread rumors, maybe try to hurt my business. The town might refuse to sell me supplies. Kai finished her coffee and looked at him steadily. "You're asking if I'm worth the trouble." "No, I'm telling you what the trouble is so you can make an informed choice." "I already made my choice last night. I'm not running." "If I run, they win. They get to believe they were right to treat me like an animal. I won't give them that satisfaction." "Fair enough. Then we need a plan. We need more than a plan. We need allies." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Allies?" "You saw how that went. Most people in town will side against us. Most, but not all. Henry the hardware man left. 2 others followed. That means there are people who can be reasoned with. We need to find them before the ones who can't be reasoned with turn this into a real war." She was right, and Jake knew it. Isolating themselves on the ranch might feel safe, but it would only make them easier targets in the long run. They needed connections, people who would at least remain neutral if not actively help them. The question was how to find those people without exposing themselves to more danger. "There's a family about 10 miles east," Jake said slowly. "The Hendersons. Bill Henderson served with me in the cavalry. His wife, Clara, is Apache, or half Apache anyway. They've dealt with their share of prejudice. Might be willing to help. And if they're not, then we wasted a day riding, but I don't think that's how it'll go." Bill's solid. "We go together. Leaving you alone here is too risky, and leaving me alone invites those cowboys to try again." They spent the next hour preparing for the trip. Jake saddled 2 horses while Kai packed supplies. They loaded rifles in the saddle sheaths and made sure they both had sidearms. Before leaving, Jake took a long look at his ranch house, wondering if it would still be standing when they returned. Kai seemed to read his thoughts. If they wanted to burn it, they would have done it already. Right now, they're still trying to decide if they're committed to real violence. That's our advantage. They're uncertain. And we're not? No, we're not. They rode east through the canyon country, following trails Jake knew by heart. The desert stretched around them, beautiful and harsh. Red rock walls rose on either side, carved by centuries of wind and water. Hawks circled overhead. The sun beat down with merciless intensity. Neither of them spoke much, saving energy for the ride and staying alert for ambush. Around noon, they stopped to water the horses at a small spring. Kai crouched by the water, cupping handfuls to drink. Jake kept watch, scanning the horizon for dust clouds or movement. Everything remained still and quiet, but that didn't mean they were safe. "You were a soldier," Kai said. It wasn't a question. "Cavalry. Spent 8 years riding these territories. Did you fight against my people?" Jake hesitated, then decided honesty was better than comfort. "Yes, 3 times. Once near the border, twice in the mountains. Lost friends in those fights. Killed men who were just defending their homes. It's the part of my life I'm least proud of. But you did it anyway. I was young and stupid and believed what I was told about duty and civilization. It took me years to understand I was on the wrong side of most of those fights." Kai stood and looked at him with something that might have been respect. Most men never admit that. They justify it forever. Most men are cowards. It takes more courage to admit you were wrong than to keep pretending you were right. They remounted and continued east. The landscape gradually changed, becoming more green as they approached a series of small valleys where water collected. The Henderson Ranch appeared in the distance, a modest spread with a decent house and several outbuildings. Cattle grazed in a pasture. Smoke rose from the chimney. As they approached, a man emerged from the barn holding a rifle. He was tall and lean, with sun-weathered skin and gray in his beard. When he recognized Jake, his posture relaxed slightly, but the rifle didn't lower. "Jake Morrison," he called out. "Wasn't expecting company. Wasn't expecting to need company, Bill. Mind if we water our horses and talk?" Bill studied Kai for a long moment, then nodded. "Come on in. Clara's making lunch." They dismounted and led the horses to the trough. Bill finally lowered his rifle and approached, extending his hand to Jake. "Been a while, friend. Too long. Bill Henderson, this is Kai. She's staying at my ranch." Bill's eyes flickered with understanding. "Heard some rumors coming out of town. Heard you stood against a mob this morning. News travels fast. Come inside. Clara will want to hear this." Inside the house, a woman was stirring a pot over the stove. She turned as they entered, and Jake saw immediately that Kai had been right about finding allies. Clara Henderson was Apache, her heritage clear in her features despite her Western dress. She took one look at Kai and Jake, then at her husband, and seemed to understand everything without a word being spoken. "Set 2 more places, Bill," she said quietly. "Our friends look hungry." Over lunch, Jake explained what had happened. The cowboys grabbing Kai, the confrontation at his ranch, the standoff that morning. Bill and Clara listened without interrupting, occasionally exchanging glances. When Jake finished, silence filled the room. Finally, Bill spoke. "You know what you're asking for trouble." "I know. The town won't forgive this, neither will the ranchers who depend on the town." "I know that too." Bill leaned back in his chair. "Clara and I have lived with one foot in both worlds for 15 years. It ain't easy. People look at us sideways. Some refuse to do business with us. Others are fine as long as we don't make waves. You're making waves, Jake. Big ones. I didn't have a choice. You did. You could have let them take her. Could have stayed out of it. That's not a choice I can live with." Clara reached across the table and took Kai's hand. "You're welcome here," she said. "Both of you. For as long as you need." Bill sighed but nodded. "Clara's right. We can't turn away people in trouble, especially when they're in trouble for doing the right thing. But, Jake, you need to understand what you're up against. This isn't just about Kai anymore. You've challenged the natural order these folks believe in. They see that as dangerous. So what do? Survive. Keep your head down. Wait for this to blow over." Kai spoke up for the first time since entering the house. "It won't blow over. Men like that don't forgive challenges to their authority. They'll keep pushing until Jake breaks or fights back." "Then what do you suggest?" Bill asked. "Make them respect us. Show them we're not afraid. Prove that we can stand our ground and there's nothing they can do about it." Clara squeezed Kai's hand. "That's a dangerous path, child. Living is dangerous. Might as well die standing up." The 4 of them talked through the afternoon, planning and strategizing. Bill knew the territory and the people. He could identify potential allies and definite enemies. Clara understood the delicate balance of living between 2 worlds. Together, they began to sketch out a strategy that might keep Jake and Kai alive long enough for tensions to ease. As the sun set, Jake and Kai prepared to ride back to the Double M.
Bill walked them to the horses. "You watch yourself, Jake."
"Those boys in town, they're not all talk. Some of them are genuinely dangerous." "I know, but I'm not backing down." "Didn't think you would. That's why I'm offering to help despite the risk. You're doing something that needs doing, even if it costs you." They rode back under the stars, the desert night cool after the heat of the day. Jake felt better knowing they had at least 2 allies. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Beside him, Kai rode in silence, her face thoughtful. "Thank you," she said suddenly. "For what?" "For not asking me to leave. It would be easier for you if I did." "Easy's not always right." "No, it's not." They reached the ranch near midnight and found it undisturbed. Inside, they did another check of all the weapons and fortifications they'd set up. Then, exhausted, they each retreated to separate rooms. Jake lay in his bed listening to the night sounds, wondering what tomorrow would bring. Down the hall, Kai was probably doing the same thing, weighing choices and consequences. The morning sun revealed fresh tracks around the ranch. Someone had been watching during the night, circling the property but not approaching. Jake found Kai already awake, studying the tracks with a grim expression. "They're testing us," she said, "seeing if we'll panic or run. Then we don't give them the satisfaction." "No, we don't. They went about the day's work with deliberate normalcy." Jake fed the animals and checked fences while Kai worked in the garden and prepared meals. To anyone watching, they appeared calm and in control. Inside, both of them were coiled tight, ready for whatever came next. The desert heat pressed down on them as another day began, full of questions and short on answers, but neither Jake Morrison nor Kai were the type to give up easily, and the Double M Ranch would stand as long as they had breath in their bodies to defend it. Days passed with strange quiet. No one from town came to the ranch. No more riders appeared on the horizon. It felt like being in the eye of a storm, peaceful on the surface but surrounded by violence waiting to break loose. Jake kept working his land while Kai helped with chores and watched the perimeter. They fell into an easy rhythm, 2 people learning to trust each other through shared danger and common purpose. On the 4th morning after the standoff, a single rider approached slowly, hands visible and empty. Jake watched from the porch as the figure resolved into Henry from the hardware store. The man looked nervous, glancing over his shoulder like he expected to be followed. Jake kept his rifle ready but didn't point it. "Jake," Henry called out when he was within earshot. "I come in peace. Got something to say." "Say it from there." "Fair enough. Listen, what happened the other morning, it didn't sit right with me. Took me a few days to work up the courage, but I needed you to know that not everyone in town agrees with how things went down. How many don't agree? Dozen or so? Maybe more who are keeping quiet about it. The problem is, the ones who do agree are louder and meaner. Led by that tall cowboy named Curtis Blackwell. He's got a reputation for being nasty when he doesn't get his way. I've dealt with men like Curtis before. I'm sure you have, but here's the thing.
He's organizing. Talking about making an example.
Says if you get away with defying the natural order, others might get the same idea. He's not just after you and the woman anymore. He's trying to use you to make a point. Kai emerged from the house and stood beside Jake. Henry nodded respectfully to her. "Ma'am?"
Henry, she acknowledged.
"Look," Henry continued, "I can't help you openly. Got a business to run and a family to feed. But I can keep you informed. Let you know what Curtis is planning. It ain't much, but it's something." "Why help at all if you won't stand with us?" Jake asked, not unkindly. "'Cause I got a daughter about your age," Henry said, looking at Kai. "And if someone grabbed her the way those boys grabbed you, I'd hope there'd be a Jake Morrison willing to stand up for her. I can't be that brave myself, but I can at least support those who are." "What's Curtis planning?" Kai asked. "Meeting tonight at the saloon. He's gathering men who think like him. Could be a dozen, could be 20. Word is they're planning to ride out here within the week and finish what they started." Jake absorbed this information. "You took a risk coming here, Henry. Thank you. Just trying to do a small bit of right in a world that's mostly wrong. I better get back before I'm missed. I'll try to get word to you again before anything happens." Henry rode away quickly, still looking nervous. Jake and Kai watched him go, then looked at each other. "A week," Jake said. "Maybe less. Then we use the time. Prepare better. Find more allies if we can. Bill and Clara are 10 miles away. If things go bad, they can't get here fast enough to help. Then we don't let things go bad. We take the fight to them before they bring it to us." Jake frowned. "What are you thinking?" "Curtis is organizing openly in town. Meeting in the saloon? He feels safe there, surrounded by his supporters. What if he suddenly didn't feel safe? You want to ride into town?" "That's suicide. Not if we're smart about it. Not if we remind them that we're not helpless victims waiting to be slaughtered." Jake wanted to argue, but he could see the logic. Staying defensive on the ranch meant eventually being overrun by superior numbers. Taking initiative might change the dynamic, make Curtis and his followers think twice. It was risky, maybe foolish, but doing nothing was guaranteed failure. "All right," he said slowly, "but we do this careful. We don't start a gunfight in the middle of town. We make our point and leave."
Agreed.
They spent the rest of the day planning. When night fell, they rode toward town under a half moon, keeping to the shadows. The 10-mile journey felt longer in darkness, every sound potentially meaning danger. They left their horses at the edge of town and approached the saloon on foot. Through the windows, Jake could see Curtis holding court at a table surrounded by men. Some Jake recognized, others were strangers. Curtis was drinking and talking loud, gesturing wildly. The men around him looked eager and mean, the kind who enjoyed having permission to be cruel. Jake felt his stomach tighten with anger and something close to fear. These weren't reasonable men you could talk to. These were predators looking for prey. "How do you want to do this?" Kai whispered.
Walk in the front door. Make sure Curtis sees us.
"Say what needs saying. Walk out. Simple. Simple usually works better than complicated." They checked their weapons one last time, then crossed the street. Jake pushed open the saloon doors and stepped inside with Kai right behind him. The noise died instantly as every head turned toward them. Curtis's expression shifted from surprise to fury. He started to stand, but Jake's voice stopped him. "Sit down, Curtis. We're not here to fight. Not tonight, anyway." "You got nerve coming here, Morrison." "Yeah, I do. Same nerve that lets you organize a lynch mob from the safety of your drinking buddies. Wanted to save you some time and effort. You want me? I'm right here. You want to settle this? We can do it now. Just you and me." Curtis's eyes narrowed. "This ain't about you and me. This is about principle." "About keeping order." "No," Kai said, her voice cutting through the tension. "This is about you being afraid. Afraid that if a white man treats an Apache woman like a human being, it means you have to question everything you believe. Easier to burn us out than admit you might be wrong. Shut your mouth, savage. Or what? You'll ride out with 20 men to attack 2 people? That's the action of a coward, not a man. Curtis's face flushed red. Several men at his table shifted uncomfortably. Jake pressed the advantage. Here's what's going to happen, Curtis. You and anyone who rides with you need to understand something. We're not running. We're not hiding. And if you come for us, we will fight back. Some of you will die. Maybe all of you. Maybe us too. But there will be blood, and it'll be on your hands. You threatening us? I'm being clear about consequences. You want to make an example? Fine. But understand that you're starting a war. And wars have a way of spreading. Bill Henderson and his Apache wife will have to pick a side. Other mixed families in the territory will watch what happens here. You really want to light that fuse? The silence in the saloon was absolute. Curtis looked around at his followers and saw doubt on several faces. The deputy in the corner looked downright worried. Only the hardest men still showed enthusiasm for violence, and even they seemed less certain than before. Get out, Curtis said finally. Get out before I change my mind about not shooting you right here. We're leaving. But Curtis, if you come for us, come ready, 'cause we won't go easy. Jake and Kai backed out of the saloon, keeping their eyes on the room. No one followed. Outside, they hurried to their horses and rode hard for the ranch, not slowing until they were well clear of town. Only then did Jake let himself breathe properly. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever done, he said. Maybe both. But it worked. You saw their faces. We planted doubt. Doubt isn't safety. No, but it's better than certainty. Before tonight, they were certain they could crush us. Now they're not sure. That gives us time. They reached the ranch as dawn approached, exhausted, but alive. Inside, Jake poured whiskey for both of them, and they sat at the kitchen table in the growing light. So what now, he asked. Now we wait. See if Curtis backs down or doubles down. Either way, we're more prepared than we were. Jake sipped his whiskey and studied Kai across the table. She looked tired but fierce, like a knife that had been sharpened on stone. In less than a week, she had gone from victim to partner to warrior. He found himself admiring her strength and certainty. His late wife Jenny would have liked Kai, he thought. They shared the same core of iron wrapped in humanity. Why aren't you afraid? He asked suddenly. Kai considered the question. I've been afraid my whole life. Afraid of soldiers, afraid of settlers, afraid of men like Curtis who think my existence is an insult to them. At some point you get tired of being afraid. You decide that living with dignity for one day beats surviving in fear for years. I made that decision a long time ago. I'm still afraid. Afraid for you, for me, for what's coming? Good. Fear keeps you sharp. It's not fear that's the problem. It's letting fear stop you from doing what's right. They finished their drinks and retreated to their separate rooms for a few hours of sleep. When Jake woke in the afternoon, he found Kai outside working with the horses. She moved around them with gentle confidence, and the animals responded to her touch. Jake watched for a while, marveling at how much had changed in just a few days. His isolated life had been shattered and rebuilt into something he didn't fully understand yet, but somehow valued more than what he'd lost. Over the next 3 days, they maintained high alert, but no attack came. Henry managed to get word through a passing traveler that Curtis's meeting had ended in arguments. Some of his supporters had backed out after hearing about Jake and Kai's visit to the saloon. Others remained committed but wanted more time to plan. Curtis himself was furious but uncertain, torn between pride and pragmatism. The situation remained dangerous but not immediately lethal. On the 4th day, Bill Henderson rode in with his wife Clara. They brought supplies and information. Talk to some folks, Bill explained. The town's divided. Half think you're troublemakers who got what's coming. Other half thinks Curtis is out of control and using you as an excuse to exercise power. Nobody's happy, but that might work in your favor. How so? Jake asked. Because when everyone's unhappy, nobody wants to escalate. Curtis can't move forward without losing support. You can't back down without losing your ranch and maybe your lives. Stalemate, for now. Clara helped Kai with the garden while the men talked strategy. You've got courage, child, Clara said quietly. More than most. But courage only takes you so far. Eventually, you need wisdom too. What's the wise choice here? I don't know. I've lived between worlds for years, and I still don't have good answers. Just keep surviving. Keep holding on to your humanity. The rest works itself out or it doesn't, but at least you'll know you didn't compromise who you are. The conversation ranged from practical matters like securing the ranch to deeper questions about justice and belonging. Bill told stories about his time in the cavalry, some funny and some tragic. Clara shared memories of her childhood, moving between Apache camps and settler towns, never quite fitting in either place. Kai talked about her family, the losses she'd endured, the small moments of joy that kept her going. Jake found himself opening up too, speaking about Jenny and their years together, the loneliness after her death, the unexpected gift of purpose that Kai's arrival had brought him. By the time Bill and Clara left the next morning, Jake felt less alone. They had allies, even if those allies couldn't stand openly with them. It was something. In the harsh arithmetic of frontier survival, something beat nothing every time. The days stretched into a week, then two. Summer heat intensified, turning the desert into a furnace. Jake and Kai worked the ranch and maintained their vigilance, but life slowly found a rhythm again. They talked more, learning each other's stories and philosophies. They discovered shared interests in books and horses and the strange beauty of the harsh land around them. A friendship grew, built on mutual respect and tested by danger. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the canyon walls, Kai asked a question she'd been holding for a while. After this is over, assuming we survive, what then? Jake thought about it. Keep ranching, I guess? Try to rebuild whatever reputation Curtis destroyed. What about you? I don't have anywhere else to go. My family's gone. My village was scattered years ago. I've been drifting since then, taking work where I could find it. This is the first place in a long time that's felt like it could be home. You're welcome to stay. For as long as you want. Even after things calm down? Even when you don't need me here for protection? Especially then. Place is too big for one person anyway. And besides, I've gotten used to having you around. Kai smiled, a rare expression that softened her features. I've gotten used to being around. They sat in comfortable silence as stars emerged in the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers. Curtis was still out there, still angry, still dangerous. The town remained divided. The future was uncertain at best and deadly at worst. But right now, in this moment, Jake Morrison and Kai were together on the Double M Ranch, watching the day end and preparing to face whatever came next. They had become partners in survival, friends in adversity, and maybe something more that neither of them was quite ready to name yet. The desert wind carried the smell of sage and dust, ancient and eternal, while two people found something worth fighting for in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by enemies and running short on time, but determined to see it through to whatever end awaited them. The sun finally disappeared below the horizon, darkness claimed the land, and they went inside to rest before morning brought the world back with all its complications and dangers. But they would face it together, and that made all the difference. Curtis Blackwell stood at the bar, nursing his sixth whiskey of the night, his mind churning with rage and humiliation. 3 weeks had passed since Morrison and that Apache woman had walked into his saloon like they owned the place. 3 weeks of watching his support crumble, his authority questioned, his plans collapse. Men he'd counted on were backing away, making excuses, finding reasons to be elsewhere. The deputy wouldn't commit to anything without federal backing. Even the banker, who'd been solid before, was now saying things like, "Let's be reasonable and maybe we're overreacting." The only ones still with him were the worst elements, the drifters and troublemakers who'd follow anyone willing to buy drinks and promise violence. 5 men sat at a table behind Curtis, waiting for him to make a decision. They were dangerous but unreliable, the kind who'd run at the first sign of real resistance. Curtis needed something more, something that would force the issue and bring back the men who'd abandoned him. An idea formed through the alcohol fog. If he couldn't rally men against Morrison directly, maybe he could create a situation where they had no choice but to act. Everyone in the territory depended on the water that flowed through the canyon. The Double M Ranch controlled a key section of that waterway. If something were to happen to Morrison's property, if the water situation became critical, the town would have to respond. And in that chaos, accidents could happen to Morrison and his Apache woman. Curtis turned to his 5 remaining followers. "Got a job for you boys. Pays $50 each. Interested?" They were interested. Curtis laid out his plan, speaking quietly so the bartender couldn't hear. The men nodded along, grinning at the simplicity and viciousness of it. By the time Curtis finished explaining, they were all in agreement. This would work. This would force everyone's hand. And Morrison would finally learn that you don't challenge Curtis Blackwell without paying the price. At the Double M Ranch, Jake woke before dawn from a dream he couldn't quite remember, but which left him feeling uneasy. He found Kai already up, standing at the window staring toward town. "Something's wrong," she said, without turning around. "What makes you say that?" "Don't know. Just a feeling, like the air before a storm." Jake trusted her instincts. They'd kept her alive this long. He checked his weapons and did a perimeter walk while the sky slowly brightened. Everything appeared normal. Cattle in the pasture, chickens in the coop, horses in the corral. No tracks, no signs of intrusion. But Kai's unease infected him, and he found himself jumping at shadows. Around mid-morning, they saw smoke on the horizon, thick black columns rising into the clear sky. Too much smoke to be from a cooking fire or chimney. Something big was burning. Jake grabbed his rifle and ran to the ridge behind the house for a better view. What he saw made his blood run cold. The Henderson ranch was on fire. The house, the barn, everything was engulfed in flames, visible even from 10 miles away. Jake ran back to the house where Kai was already saddling horses. They didn't need to discuss it. Bill and Clara needed help, and they were the only ones who would provide it. They rode hard across the desert, pushing the horses as fast as they dared. The smoke grew thicker as they approached, filling the air with the smell of burning wood and something worse underneath it. When they finally reached the Henderson property, they found it completely destroyed. The house was a collapsed shell. The barn was still burning. Cattle had scattered. And Bill Henderson sat on the ground beside his wife's body, his face blank with shock. Jake and Kai dismounted quickly. Kai went to Clara while Jake approached Bill carefully. "Bill, what happened?" Bill looked up with eyes that didn't seem to see. "They came at dawn. 5 men. I was out checking the herd. Heard Clara scream. By the time I got back, they'd already—" He stopped, unable to continue. Kai checked Clara's body and looked at Jake with a grim expression. She'd been shot twice, once in the chest and once in the head. Quick and brutal. No hesitation. This wasn't a warning or intimidation, but I think it was probably different. This was murder, plain and simple. "Did you see their faces?" Jake asked gently. "No. Masked. But one of them had Curtis's horse. I'd know that paint anywhere. After they killed Clara, they set fire to everything. Told me to give Morrison a message. Said this is what happens to Apache lovers. Said you're next." Jake felt rage boil up inside him, hot and murderous. This was his fault. Curtis couldn't get to him directly, so he'd gone after the Hendersons. Clara was dead because Jake had asked them for help, because Bill had been willing to be an ally. The guilt threatened to overwhelm him, but Kai's hand on his shoulder steadied him. "We need to get Bill somewhere safe," she said. "Then we end this." "End it how? How do you think? Curtis just declared war."
We respond in kind.
Bill looked up at them. Don't let Clara's death start more killing." That's not what she would have wanted. Bill, with respect, what Clara would have wanted stopped mattering to Curtis the moment he sent men to kill her, Jake said. "This ends today, one way or another." They helped Bill onto a horse and took him to a neighboring ranch whose owner had always been neutral. The rancher agreed to take Bill in, horrified by what had happened. Jake and Kai didn't stay long. They had work to do in town, and waiting would only make it harder. The ride back gave Jake time to think. He'd avoided direct confrontation for weeks, hoping reason would prevail. But Curtis had just proved that reason wasn't part of this equation. The man was willing to kill innocent people to make his point. That changed everything. Jake had tried the peaceful route, and it had gotten Clara Henderson murdered. Now there was only one language Curtis understood, and Jake was prepared to speak it fluently. "When we get to town," Kai said as they rode, "Curtis will likely be at the saloon. He'll have his men with him. We can't fight all of them. Then we don't fight all of them. We go straight for Curtis. Cut the head off the snake. That's likely to get us killed. Probably. But doing nothing guarantees more deaths. Clara won't be the last if we don't stop this now." Kai nodded. She understood the math. Sometimes the only way to prevent future violence was to embrace present violence, as ugly as that truth was. They checked their weapons as they approached town, making sure everything was loaded and ready. The streets were busier than usual, people going about their business unaware that war had just become inevitable. They tied their horses outside the saloon and pushed through the doors together. Curtis was exactly where Jake expected, holding court at his usual table with 4 of his men. The 5th was probably still at the Henderson ranch, making sure nothing could be saved. Curtis looked up as Jake and Kai entered, and his expression shifted from surprise to something like triumph. "Morrison, come to turn yourself in?" Jake crossed the distance to Curtis's table in 3 steps and grabbed him by the throat, lifting him out of his chair. Curtis's men reached for their guns but froze when Kai drew both her revolvers and pointed them steadily at the group. "Don't," she said quietly. "I will shoot every one of you before you clear leather." Jake slammed Curtis against the wall hard enough to rattle his teeth. "Clara Henderson is dead, murdered by your men. You want to tell me that's not on you?" Curtis tried to laugh, but it came out as a wheeze. "Don't know what you're talking about. Your horse was there. Your men wore masks, but Bill Henderson recognized that paint. You sent them to kill his wife and burn his ranch. You murdered an innocent woman because you couldn't get to me. You're crazy, Morrison. I've been here all morning. Dozens of witnesses. Your men weren't. 5 of them. Where are they, Curtis?" "Don't know what you're talking about." Jake tightened his grip on Curtis's throat. "Last chance. Where are your men?" One of Curtis's followers spoke up, voice shaking. "They ain't come back yet. Left before dawn for a job Curtis hired them for." He didn't say what job. Curtis's eyes widened with panic as he realized his man had just confirmed everything. Jake felt the rage threatening to take over completely. He could kill Curtis right now, snap his neck, or draw his gun and shoot him point blank. It would be easy. It would be satisfying. But it would also make him a murderer, and Jenny's voice echoed in his head, reminding him that there was a difference between justice and revenge. "Here's what's going to happen," Jake said, loud enough for everyone in the saloon to hear. "Curtis Blackwell ordered the murder of Clara Henderson. He sent 5 men to burn out Bill Henderson's ranch." One of those men just confirmed it. "Curtis is going to jail, and those 5 men are going to hang when they're found. Anyone who has a problem with that can step outside with me right now and we'll settle it." No one moved. 5. The deputy, who had been watching from the bar, finally stirred himself to action. "Jake, you can't just drag Curtis to jail based on hearsay. It's not hearsay when his own man confirms it. Clara Henderson is dead. Her ranch is ashes." "Unless you want more blood on your hands, you'll do your job and lock this man up until a federal marshal can sort it out." The deputy looked around the saloon, gauging the mood. What he saw must have convinced him, because he finally nodded and approached with handcuffs. "Curtis Blackwell, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder." Curtis started protesting, but Jake shoved him toward the deputy. "Get him locked up before I change my mind about letting him live." As the deputy led Curtis away, Jake turned to face the remaining men at the table. "Where are the 5 who rode to the Henderson place?" "Don't know. They were supposed to come back here after." "Then you better hope they never show their faces in this territory again. Because if I see them, I will kill them. That's not a threat or a promise. That's a fact." Jake and Kai backed out of the saloon and mounted their horses. The town seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. They rode toward the jail and found the deputy struggling to lock a fighting Curtis into a cell. Jake helped wrestle him inside, then stood back as the cell door clanged shut. "You're making a mistake, Morrison," Curtis spat. "You think this ends with me in jail? My men will come for you. The whole town will turn against you. Your men are murderers who will hang. And the town just watched you get arrested for ordering a woman's death. I don't think you've got as much support as you believe anymore." Jake left the jail with Kai and found a crowd gathering in the street. Henry from the hardware store pushed to the front. "Is it true? Curtis killed Clara Henderson?" "Order it done." "Sent 5 men to murder her and burn the ranch. Bill Henderson survived, but lost everything." A murmur ran through the crowd, shock and anger mixing together. Henry looked sick. "Jesus, I knew Curtis was mean, but I didn't think he'd go that far." "Well, he did. And unless a federal marshal gets here soon to take custody, I'm not sure Curtis will survive long enough to stand trial." A lot of people liked Clara Henderson. That was true. Clara had been part of the community for years, providing medical help and midwifery to families regardless of their background. She'd never hurt anyone, never caused trouble. Her murder was senseless and cruel, and the town was beginning to realize what kind of man Curtis really was. Over the next few hours, 3 of Curtis's 5 men rode back into town separately, unaware that their boss was in jail. The townspeople grabbed them before they could escape, and the deputy reluctantly locked them up alongside Curtis. They tried to claim innocence, but their timing in Curtis's earlier confirmation made that impossible. 2 men were still missing, presumably smart enough to keep riding once they realized the plan had fallen apart. Jake and Kai returned to the Double M Ranch as evening approached. Neither of them spoke much during the ride. Clara's death hung over everything, a reminder of the cost of standing up for what was right. Jake kept seeing Bill Henderson's blank, shocked face staring at his wife's body. That image would haunt him for the rest of his life. At the ranch, they went through the motions of evening chores by rote. Feed the animals, check the fences, secure the buildings. The work was familiar and grounding, but it couldn't erase the reality of what had happened. When they finally sat down to eat, neither had much appetite. "Bill was right," Jake said finally. "This is my fault. If I'd just let those cowboys take you that first day, Clara would still be alive." "No," Kai said firmly. "Clara would still be alive if Curtis wasn't a murderer. If those cowboys weren't willing to grab a woman off the street, if the town had stepped in earlier to stop Curtis instead of looking away. You didn't cause this, Jake. Curtis did. Doesn't make me feel better. It's not supposed to. Clara's death should hurt. Should make us angry. But blaming yourself is just another way of avoiding the real problem, which is men like Curtis who think they can do whatever they want without consequences." Jake knew she was right intellectually, but emotionally he still felt responsible. He'd brought this storm down on everyone around him by refusing to compromise his principles. The question now was whether those principles were worth the cost. They spent the night in silence, each dealing with grief and guilt in their own way. When morning came, Bill Henderson arrived at the ranch looking hollowed out but functioning. He'd come to thank them for getting Curtis arrested, though his eyes remained dead and distant. Jake offered him a place to stay, and Bill accepted with a numb nod. He moved into the spare room and mostly kept to himself, going through the motions of existence without really living. A week later, a federal marshal finally arrived from the territorial capital. He interviewed witnesses, examined evidence, and concluded that Curtis Blackwell and his 3 captured accomplices were guilty of murder and arson. They would be transported to the capital for trial, though the marshal made it clear the outcome was inevitable. The 3 men would hang, and Curtis would spend the rest of his life in prison at minimum. More likely he'd hang too. The marshal also took statements from Jake and Kai about the original incident that started everything. He seemed surprised that Curtis had gone to such lengths over what he called a minor dispute about a woman's freedom. That casual dismissal of Kai's humanity made Jake angry, but he held his tongue. The important thing was that Curtis and his men would face justice. After the marshal left with his prisoners, the town slowly returned to normal. Without Curtis's poisonous influence, people were more willing to accept Jake's choices. Henry and a few others apologized for not standing with him earlier. The banker restored Jake's credit. The preacher gave a sermon about loving your neighbor without qualifiers. It wasn't perfect reconciliation, but it was movement in the right direction. Bill Henderson remained at the Double M Ranch, helping with work but rarely speaking. Jake and Kai gave him space to grieve while making sure he wasn't alone. Slowly, painfully, Bill began to heal. He would never be the man he was before Clara's death, but he found ways to keep living, to honor her memory by not giving up. One evening, 2 months after Clara's murder, Bill joined Jake and Kai on the porch for coffee. It was the first time he'd voluntarily sought their company. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the canyon walls gold and red. Finally, Bill spoke. "Clara would have liked knowing you two ended up together." Jake and Kai exchanged glances. "We're not together," Jake said carefully. "Kai's staying here because she has nowhere else to go?" Bill smiled sadly. "Keep telling yourself that. But I've got eyes. I see how you look at each other when you think no one's watching. I see how you work together like you've been partners for years instead of months. Clara saw it too, before she died. She told me you'd found something worth holding on to. Jake wanted to deny it but couldn't find the words. The truth was, he had developed feelings for Kai over the months they'd spent together. She was strong and intelligent and brave, everything he admired in a person. But pursuing anything felt wrong given how they'd met, given Clara's death, given everything. Kai stood up and walked to the porch railing, looking out at the darkening desert. Clara was wise, but wisdom doesn't change facts. Jake and I are partners in survival, friends. Anything more than that would be complicated. Life's complicated, Bill said. But that's not a reason to avoid it. Clara and I had 15 good years before she was taken from me. I'd have given anything for more, but I'm grateful for what we had. Don't waste time you might not have waiting for things to be less complicated. They never will be. He went inside, leaving Jake and Kai alone on the porch. The stars were emerging, bright against the darkening sky. Neither of them spoke for a long time, letting Bill's words settle in the space between them. "He's not wrong," Kai said finally. "Things between us have changed, evolved beyond what they were at the start. I know. I feel it too. But Kai, I don't want you to feel obligated or pressured. You came here as a victim of violence. You stayed because you had nowhere else to go. I won't take advantage of that vulnerability." Kai turned to face him, her expression serious. "Jake Morrison, in the months I've known you, you've defended me against a mob. stood by me when the whole town turned against you, fought beside me, and given me a home without asking for anything in return. If I had feelings for you, and I'm not saying I do, they wouldn't be because I'm vulnerable or grateful. They'd be because you're a good man in a world that's often short on good men. And do you have feelings for me? She moved closer, close enough that he could smell sage and soap and something uniquely her. I don't know yet. I know I trust you. I know I feel safe here. I know I don't want to leave. Maybe that's enough to build on. Maybe not. But Bill's right about one thing. Life's too short and too uncertain to waste time pretending we don't feel what we feel. Jake reached out and took her hand, rough and calloused from work. So what do we do about it? We take it slow. We see where this goes without rushing or forcing anything. We've been through enough violence and chaos. Whatever happens between us should be built on peace and choice, not adrenaline and circumstance. I can live with that. They stood together on the porch as full darkness fell, holding hands and watching the desert night unfold around them. Inside the house, Bill Henderson was probably thinking about his lost wife and the years they'd had together. Somewhere in the territorial capital, Curtis Blackwell and his men were waiting in cells for justice to arrive. And here on the Double M Ranch, two people who'd met through violence and survived through courage were finding something quieter but no less important, the possibility of building a future together. The next morning brought news that Curtis and his 3 accomplices had been found guilty and sentenced to hang. The execution would take place in 2 weeks. The territorial governor wanted to make an example of them, send a message that murdering settlers over racial hatred wouldn't be tolerated. It was the right decision, but Jake took no pleasure in it. Clara Henderson was still dead. Bill was still grieving. Justice didn't bring anyone back. The day of the hanging, Jake and Bill rode to the Capitol to witness the execution. Kai offered to come, but Jake asked her to stay and watch the ranch. Some things didn't need her attendance, and watching men die was one of them. The execution was efficient and grim. Curtis went to the gallows, still protesting his innocence, still claiming he'd been set up. His 3 accomplices went quietly, perhaps grateful it was ending. When it was over, Jake felt nothing but empty. On the ride back, Bill spoke for the first time since leaving. Thank you for seeing it through. Clara deserved justice. She deserved to live. Justice is a poor substitute. True, but it's what we have. They rode in silence until the Double M came into view. Kai was working in the garden, her figure silhouetted against the afternoon sun. Bill smiled again, that same sad smile. You're a lucky man, Jake. Don't waste it. I'm trying not to. Over the following weeks, life at the ranch settled into a new rhythm. Bill eventually decided to rebuild on his own land, though he visited regularly. Jake helped him raise a new house and barn, and several townspeople contributed materials and labor, trying to make amends for their earlier silence. It wasn't enough to bring Clara back, but it was something. Jake and Kai continued their careful exploration of whatever was growing between them. They worked side by side during the day, talked on the porch in the evenings, and slowly began to build a partnership that went beyond survival. There were no grand declarations or dramatic moments, just a gradual deepening of connection that felt natural and right. One night, 6 months after that first day when 3 drunk cowboys had brought Kai to his ranch, Jake and Kai sat on the porch under a sky full of stars. The desert air was cool and clean, carrying the promise of rain. They'd been talking about expanding the ranch, maybe getting more cattle, when Kai suddenly changed the subject. Do you ever regret it? Standing up for me that first day? Jake thought about Clara Henderson and the violence and the months of tension and fear. Then he thought about the woman sitting beside him, strong and brave and becoming more essential to his life with each passing day. I regret Clara's death. I regret not stopping Curtis sooner, but I don't regret defending you. That was the easiest choice I ever made. Even knowing what it would cost? Even knowing. Some things are worth the cost, Kai. You're one of them. She leaned her head against his shoulder, a gesture of trust and affection that still felt new. My people have a saying, the willow bends in the storm but doesn't break. I used to think that meant survival through submission, but now I think it means something else. It means being flexible enough to adapt while staying rooted in who you are. I like that. Me too. You taught me that, Jake, by standing firm when you could have bent. By adapting to new realities while staying true to your principles. They sat together in comfortable silence as the stars wheeled overhead and the desert wind whispered through the canyon. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new work, new decisions. But tonight, Jake Morrison and Kai were exactly where they needed to be, together on the Double M Ranch, building something worth protecting in a world that often seemed determined to tear good things apart. They had survived the storm, and now they were learning how to thrive in its aftermath. The future remained uncertain, but uncertainty was just another word for possibility, and they were ready to face it together, come what may.